Story 1. Why I Hate Lightning McQueen. I don't think I can put into words how good it feels being a father. I love Daniel more than I could possibly say his bright, shining smile, his endless curiosity about the world around him, and his gentle, loving nature. I didn't think I was capable of loving someone else this much, but every time I heard his little laugh or saw his smile, I knew. Even the smallest things he did made me so incredibly proud. Every achievement he earned was something I wanted to celebrate. Even the interests he had that I didn't like, I tried to at least enjoy his enjoyment of them, if that makes any sense. Cars were one of those interests. Those Disney movies with Owen Wilson playing Lightning McQueen, a red race car who unsurprisingly loved racing. I suppose the movies weren't that bad, but ever since he'd been a baby, Daniel had loved watching the first two, and his interest hadn't gone anywhere by the time the third one came around. I'd been planning to take him on opening night, and I'll admit, even I was a little excited for it, partially because the trailer showed Lightning McQueen getting into a terrible car accident, and I was hoping that might mean the movie would be a little more interesting, and partially because I wanted a break from job hunting. I'd been a salesman to local Chevrolet dealership for the past few years. I'd actually been hoping to work my way up to sales manager, although I suppose those hopes got dashed when half the sales team was laid off, myself included. I didn't mind watching Daniel after school, but I didn't like letting my wife, Teresa, be the only breadwinner. She kept assuring me it was fine, that I'd find something, that she was making enough to support us for now. For the time being, life went on just like it was supposed to. It was a fairly warm October that year. Teresa had to be down at the hospital early, so it was up to me to help Daniel get ready and walk him to school. He liked school. He was a friendly boy, so he seemed to make friends easily, although granted, kids at that age seem to think everyone in their class is their friend. We left a little early on the walkover, taking in the beautiful autumn leaves and early Halloween decorations. We lived in a quaint little suburban neighborhood. The houses were close together and almost all identical. A one-car driveway and a tree out front of each one. I'd noticed one of the neighbors had hung a scary spider's web in the tree out front of their house, and it got me thinking about what I might do with our tree. I'd been walking beside Daniel and lost in thought, which was probably why I didn't notice anything until he pointed it out to me. "Daddy, look, it's lightning." I was jolted from my thoughts and looked over to where Daniel was pointing. There was a bright red coupe just down the street, with a familiar design. The grille was a custom job depicting the wry smile of Lightning McQueen. The windshield even depicted his eyes. The resemblance to the character was almost perfect. "I want to see." Daniel almost ran across the street. To get a better look, I stopped him, even though there weren't any cars coming, just to take a quick look around and be sure, before taking his hand and letting him cross the street with me. "I wonder who owns him," I said, as we made it to the car. Up close, the detail was no less stunning, and if I'm honest, a little bit creepy. Daniel didn't seem to notice that, though. All he cared about was that it was lightning right here in front of him. "Daddy, can I go inside?" he begged. "Maybe later. I don't think we can go in right now," I said. The car was parked beside a playground that we frequented, abandoned at that time of day. I figured one of the nearby houses must have owned it, but I wasn't sure who. I'll tell you what, I'll see if I can find out who owns it, and maybe he'll let you check it out, I promised. Daniel seemed fine with that, and gave the car one parting look before he let me lead him away. I spent the day applying to new jobs, and had one phone interview with a woman who I'm sure was only trying to be as condescending as was humanly possible. I did a quick Google search to see if anyone in the area owned a Lightning McQueen model, and found myself looking at similar models online. Nothing was quite the same as the one I saw. The eyes and mouth were different. I'd figured that whoever had made the model must have been some sort of hobbyist who'd have documented it on a YouTube channel, or at least sought some sort of recognition for all their hard work. But I came up with nothing. When the afternoon came, I prepared Daniel's after-school snack and left to go and pick him up. Passing by the playground, I looked around for any sign of that Lightning McQueen car. No luck. Whoever owned it had moved it. I didn't dwell on it too much, figuring I'd see it again later. Later came a lot faster than I'd expected. I saw the damn thing parked right outside the school. For a moment I wondered if it belonged to some other kid's parent, and he'd made it to impress them. Lightning was certainly getting a lot of attention, with all sorts of little kids crowded around him. Daniel was among them. When he saw me coming, he said a quick goodbye to one of his friends, Toby, and rushed over to me. "Daddy, look, Lightning McQueen came to visit." "So he did," I said. "Did you get to go inside?" "No." He sounded a little disappointed. He's just been sitting there all day. Now that struck me as a little odd. I would have thought whoever had made the car would come out and claim some for their work. "Really?" I asked, a little concerned now. "You didn't see his owner?" "No, I don't think anyone's inside right now," Daniel said. Although I didn't know how he could be sure. I couldn't see through the windows. Actually, I wasn't entirely sure how a driver would see out of those windows. Come to think of it, maybe he'll still be there tomorrow, Daniel said. "Yes, maybe," I replied, and took his hand to lead him home. That night, Teresa and I were woken up by a loud crash from outside. I jolted awake, disoriented and confused, unsure if I was dreaming or not. Outside, I heard the squeal of tires, and shambled to my bedroom window to look out over the front yard. I couldn't see anything in the darkness, aside from an empty street out front. For a few moments, I listened to the semi-silence of the suburban night. There was no sound of a car speeding away, or any sign of anything else. "Paul, what is it?" Teresa asked, standing by the bed and awaiting my verdict. "I don't know. I don't see any damage. But should we go out and look?" Part of me didn't really want to, but I wasn't sure how much sleep I'd get unless I confirmed that they hadn't hit her car in the driveway. I put on a pair of slippers and headed downstairs, then out the front door to assess the damage, and swore under my breath when I saw what had happened. Our small tree was almost snapped in half and nearly uprooted. Something had hit it with a lot of force. My first instinct was a drunk driver, and I looked around for any sign of them, but saw nothing on my empty street. I rushed back inside to share my findings with Teresa, and we called the cops. The police weren't able to do much aside from take a statement and look around a little. There was no saving the tree, so I'd need to have what was left of it removed. They weren't able to find any broken off pieces of the car either. Teresa and I didn't get much sleep that night, and after putting Daniel back to bed after the commotion, I stayed up looking through job boards, then through YouTube videos. By the time I had to take Daniel to school, I was dead tired and shuffled through the motions of that morning. Lightning McQueen hadn't moved from his spot from yesterday and remained parked out front of the school. Daniel stared and smiled, but didn't seem as interested in him today. Neither of us mentioned it. I kissed him on the cheek and headed back home, taking only a brief glance at the car before leaving. As soon as I got home, I looked up a cheap landscaping company and called them about removing the tree. I can probably book something in for tomorrow. Reman on the phone promised me we're a little backed up. It's weird. We've got a lot of calls like this today. For broken trees, I asked. Yeah, there's been a bunch all over the neighborhood. I think a bunch of kids pulled some sort of stunt last night. I couldn't imagine a group of teenagers deliberately crashing their cars into trees for fun, even if they were just small trees. But, well, kids these days were a lot different than back when I was in high school. I took the slot for tomorrow and turned on the TV to check out the news. Sure enough, there was a report on all the vandalism from the night before. Our cat, Hercule, rubbed against my legs as I watched, and I absent-mindedly petted him before letting him out to wander the neighborhood after that. I took a nap on the couch, burnt out from all that excitement last night. When my phone's alarm went off, I slowly woke to work on Daniel's after-school snack and checked the back door to see if Urkel had come back. No sign of him, but I wasn't too worried about that. He seemed to prefer being outdoors, and I knew he'd come back when he got tired. I went out to go and pick up Daniel. Lightning McQueen was gone when I got to the school, and I noticed a police cruiser parked in the Kiss and Riot. That made me feel uneasy. I hope everything's all right, I remarked to Daniel once I'd collected him and looked over at the police cruiser. Daniel stared at it as if he was surprised to find it there. Did something happen today? I asked him. I dunno, I didn't see, he said, and seemed to think about it for a bit. Rick said the D word, so maybe that's why. I highly doubted the cops were going to show up just because some kid uttered a cuss word. I stared at the cruiser, then at the empty space where Lightning McQueen had been the day before. No lightning today, I asked. He left, Daniel said. He took Toby for a ride, though my heart stopped in my chest. Lightning took Toby? I asked. Yeah. Toby was looking at him during recess and his door open. So he got in and they left. I stared at that cop car, feeling physically ill as I realized why they were there. I knew Toby's parents. They were good people, and I couldn't imagine what they were going through at that moment. I took Daniel by the hand and pulled him towards home, trying to keep calm as I went. When I got there, I let Daniel eat his snack and watch TV, while I called Teresa and told her what had happened. I then called Toby's parents to check in with them. It was as I'd feared. Toby was missing, and the suspect had been driving a car that looked like Lightning McQueen. The police came by briefly to ask Daniel some questions. The officers were gentle, even though I don't think Daniel was able to give them anything of value. He was too young to understand the danger. I'd heard an Amber Alert was issued, but I had a sinking fear in my stomach that it was too late. I considered keeping Daniel home from school the next day. I'd heard nothing about Toby being found, and That sick feeling in my stomach hadn't passed, but eventually I relented. The school was still open and was being watched by the police. Maybe it was safer to let him go today. Reluctantly, I went through our morning routine and walked him to school, eyes peeled for that fucking Lightning McQueen car. The other parents dropping off their children seemed grim and shifty. The demeanor was more guarded and uneasy. Some of the parents I usually chatted with ignored me in favor of making sure their own kids were safe. I didn't take that personally. A lot had chosen to stay home. I didn't blame them for that. I watched Daniel until he was safely inside the school and walked home slowly, my feet almost dragging on the sidewalk. It wasn't until I got home that I remembered something I'd completely forgotten about in the stress that had defined last night. Urkel. As I got closer to the house, I spotted him on the street. Recognition immediately tore my mind away from every other thought as I saw that tuft of orange fur, and I broke into a run, already fearing the worst. His green eyes stared vacantly upwards, and his mouth was open, with flies already beginning to inspect it. This had been recent. This had just happened. I couldn't bring myself to look at the blood spatter on the pavement and the guts. I wanted to be sick, and I wanted to cry, as if this week couldn't possibly get any worse. I cleaned up the mess, giving poor Urkel a shroud and a garbage bag that I shoveled him into, and burying him out back. I was just finishing burying him when the landscapers arrived to take care of the tree. As they worked, I sat in my living room, still trying to process all that had happened over the past few days. On the surface, I tried to tell myself that this was all a random series of events, unconnected and unfortunate, but it felt like much more than that. 3 surreal vehicle incidents in less than 3 days, all coinciding with the arrival of that fucking Lightning McQueen model. It seemed too crazy to be true. I tried not to think about it and turned on the TV, watching the news to try and take my mind off of this. That didn't work either. There'd been a murder, not just a hit and run. Oh no, worse than that. A car had gone off the road and right into the living room of a house not far from where I lived. They'd all been killed in the accident. Well, almost all of them. There was no sign of the driver or the car. And then they reveal the names of the deceased, names I recognized. They weren't friends. No, I don't think I even knew where they'd lived until then, but I'd met them out front of Daniel's school, and when they showed a picture of the house, a house almost identical to mine, I couldn't help but notice that there wasn't a tree out front of that house, but there was a fresh mound of dirt where the tree had once been. A mound of dirt that looked a lot like the one that would be outside my house very soon. I felt myself start to shake. There was no denying this, or if there was, I just didn't want to deny it. Something was wrong, and I didn't even know how to begin to explain any of it. Some lunatic in a Lightning McQueen car was driving around kidnapping children and crashing into things. It occurred to me that if he'd been behind all that damage, then perhaps his car would have shown signs of wear. There'd been no such thing when I'd last seen it, but that wasn't much of a comfort, was it? I watched that report on the news, unable to understand the why behind any of this, until eventually I decided that I just didn't care. Why didn't matter? The police could handle that. All I needed was to take care of my family. I booked the hotel right then and there, 3rd floor, where no car could possibly reach us, and I set to packing our things immediately. When the time came to get Daniel, I didn't bother making him a snack. I called Teresa and told her to come home. I told her it was urgent, and then went to get Daniel. I figured I could meet her at home, and we could leave immediately. Daniel seemed quieter when I picked him up, and I kept a brisk pace on the walk home, holding his little hand tightly. "Is Toby coming back?" he asked me as we walked. "I don't know," I reply. "I hope so. I hope the police bring him back safe." "Me too," Daniel said quietly, glancing over his shoulder. It seems like such a minor conversation, the kind of thing I wouldn't even remember later. But I remember it now. I remember the last time I spoke to my son. When we got home, Teresa was already there, and she almost sprinted towards me. By the time I was close enough to see why, I barely noticed her at all, where my front door had once been. Now there was a gaping hole of splintered wood and drywall, roughly the size of a car. It looked sickeningly similar to the house I'd seen on the news earlier. The tire tracks on my lawn passed over where my tree had once been, and I felt that gnawing sickness in my stomach return as I realized that I could have easily been inside the house when the car had come. "Paul, what the fuck is going on?" Teresa cried, and in the back of my mind I almost was grateful for the damage, since at least my concerns had been vindicated. "I'll explain later. We need to go now. Get in the car." "I'll get the suitcases. I've already booked a hotel," I said, and handed Daniel off to her. I headed towards where my front door had once been, and hurried through the ruins of my house upstairs to get our luggage. As I retrieved the suitcase from mine and Teresa's room, I saw him through the window. Lightning McQueen parked patiently across the street. My eyes widened in horror. The model had taken some damage. The paint was scratched, and one of the mirrors had broken off. I'd expected whoever was behind the wheel of that goddamn thing to be long gone, but no, they'd just been waiting for another chance. I didn't waste my time with the suitcases. I sprinted back down the stairs as I heard the engine rev. I wasn't even at the door when I heard the sickening crunch of metal on metal and Teresa's scream of agony. When I got out the door, I saw just what had happened to her. She was pinned between the side of her van and Lightning McQueen. The model had hit her head on and backed up, leaving her to collapse uselessly to the ground. Through the windows of the van, I could see Daniel, clearly terrified. Lightning hit the van again, tires rolling over Teresa as it did, and the van rocked. I screamed, but remained frozen and helpless. Daniel was struggling to escape. He opened the door of the van as Lightning reared up to ram it again and looked at me before running towards me. I might have screamed. I can't remember if I did. Lightning swerved away from the van, going around it and hitting the speed again. Daniel froze in his tracks, looking into the headlights of the oncoming car as it sped towards him, and in the blink of an eye overtook him. That snarling mouth hit Daniel head-on and slammed him against the brick of my house. Just one quick movement before the car shifted into reverse, I lost control of myself. I ran towards Daniel, but I could tell that there was no saving him. I can only hope he died on impact. The headlights of the car fixated on me, and with tears in my eyes I looked towards them, waiting for them to bear down on me. But they didn't. Lightning McQueen idled its driver, if there was a driver, studying me from behind the eyes on the windshield. Then, finally, the car pulled back. I heard sirens in the distance and could only watch helplessly as Lightning McQueen sped off into the distance, the blood of my wife and son on his grill. I'm told the police found pieces of the car abandoned in a dumpster a few kilometers away. Whoever had made the thing just swapped out what they couldn't fix to keep the vehicle looking somewhat pristine. Of course, they never found out just who it was or even why they did it. They took Teresa off of life support last week after the doctors declared complete brain death. Her loss was another painful blow. I can't say how much I spent on trying to save her. More than I had, I'm sure. I'm told that her organs might help save some lives, but that's not much consolation. I buried her beside Daniel. She loved him as much as I did, and if it had been me, it's what I'd have wanted. I saw on the news that a Lightning McQueen model tore through a playground last month, killing 6 people. 4 of them were kids. I've heard it mentioned as having been seen in a few cases of child abductions, too. I still don't know why. Maybe some sick bastard out there just likes killing kids, and making his car look like Lightning McQueen was the best way to make them get close. I don't know. I don't think I'll ever get any answers. What I know for sure is that I have nothing left in this world. Daniel is gone, and so is Teresa. As I write this, I'm sitting in a motel room that I know I can't afford. I don't suppose it matters. If the sleeping pills don't do their work, I'll just try something else later. All I can say is this: if you ever see a model of Lightning McQueen on your street, get the hell out of town. Story 2. The first admissions of the year. October 9th, 2006. One day, they will catch me, FBI police. Men in black. Whoever the hell it is that comes after somebody like me. I guess when the time comes they will read this, which is precisely the point of this. This is my journal. These are the inscribed thoughts of a man slowly gaining fame, one news station, newspaper at a time. Counties right now, cities soon, statewide panic will follow. In the end, the world will pick up the stories, and the Tri-County News affiliate that aired printed the gory details of my first crimes will become a macabre tourist spot. I should have started this earlier. I'll try to catch up. My first murder was easy. Rapist hung from a tree, reported suicide. Easier to set up than I ever expected. TV makes it seem so hard to get away with. It's not. Second murder, child abuser. The little boy had decent enough family except for the father, so I decided he wouldn't be too strongly missed. He wasn't, by the way. Turned out after the mugging. Fatal stabbing. His wife remarried to the cop that investigated the crime. Third murder was a murderer. I tortured him first. I wanted to savor the irony. I did. He pissed his pants twice before the gun that killed the brother killed the keeper. That one I didn't even cover up. I left only a suspected murderer. Child rapist as evidence. Even if I had left evidence against myself, the police would have only tracked me down to shake my hand. They probably hoped it was one among them that did it. First 3 must be the most important, as the order of events preceding the murders following them are a little fuzzy. Drownings, electrocutions, stabbings, fatal beatings. I killed somebody with a blowtorch once. Saw it in a movie. I guess the death toll is roughly 30. I've been doing this for about 2 months. I watch the news when I can. I don't see my murders on the news too often. I assume it's because the people I kill are the bane of the local law enforcement, and they don't want word to spread that they are begrudgingly hunting their invisible best friend. At the same time, you don't really report somebody scraping shit off the sidewalk as news. It's pretty apparent that I don't have any qualms with calling myself a murderer. I am. It's also apparent that after my first 2 murders I developed a taste for torture. I thought in the beginning that murder wouldn't agree with my conscience and kept it as simple an ordeal to stomach as possible. I learned quickly that murder is as primal and satisfying as sex. Like sex, the second time held no special thrill, which is why for the third, I introduced torture to the primal spectacle. I felt alive in my newly triggered sense of vengeance when his brother discovered the truth about what his only son went through while in the care of his trusted uncle. He was shot dead somewhere between dialing 911 and the last one. That man had tortured his nephew. That man had foregone spankings for sodomy with a plunger handle. That man replaced groundings from TV for forcing that small child to watch him masturbate to gay porn. And he had killed the boy's father right before his eyes. The father and son were never heard from again. For all this he deserved to cry, to beg for his life, to piss his pants as a barrel of empty chambers, save one clicked away pressed firmly to his newly shattered testicles. That night my method of deathbed reform was born. That night I began having the regrets I still feel to this day, that I cannot change how little my first 2 victims suffered. October 9th, 2006. Pretty warm night tonight for the fall. I'm sitting at a bus stop outside a bar. Downtown Tulsa bus stops have these nice covered benches so I can sit here and write while I wait. Why am I waiting here in downtown Tulsa on an unseasonably warm Monday night? To kill a man. To kill a man who killed 2 others and got away with it. For a while, I was walking around the downtown area today waiting for somebody like him to come along. It didn't take him too long to show up, but he was on his way to work. I had to pass the time. Some type of desk job, giant building downtown. He wore a nice suit. Nearly 10 hours later, and he leaves for the bar. Followed him closely. He was too preoccupied with his sick thoughts to notice me. He was also too busy noticing the women we passed by. He was walking. By the way, I don't have a car, and luckily neither does he. So here we are, Courtesan's Bar, whatever the fuck that means. I'm not familiar with the word, and I assume the business types flowing into the building don't know what it means either. It just sounds professional and pricey, so they go thinking their suits will impress. I'm not impressed, but I am wanting a dare right about now. But I don't feel like going in there and risking losing him in a crowd. I checked the back and side door. Both are emergency exits only, so I know he is trapped into leaving through the pricey revolving glass bottleneck. I am growing anxious. He not only killed 2 people, he also kills cats. I fucking despise those who torture and kill animals, especially so senselessly, yet I am currently smiling. I am capable of giving the deaths of these poor, beautiful animals some meaning. Justifying their death as inspiration is a shallow justification, but it's the best I can do to honor them. I have it all planned out, and I am growing very, very anxious. Philip Harneth. The warm, windless air clung like tightly stretched fabric across his sweaty face. Though drunk and walking in an erratic stumble, he still had the restraint to stop himself from wiping his brow with the sleeve of his expensive black suit jacket. just inches from his face. He pulled a handkerchief from an inner pocket of his unbuttoned jacket and wiped his face before stuffing it into his pants pocket. His gait became even more unstable as he diverted his blurred attention to unbuttoning the 2 buttons underneath his collar. As Philip Harneth stumbled feebly towards his bed, his final resting place, a dark shadow trailed silently behind, stopping at every deep contrasting darkness the cars, alleyways, side streets, and gaps between the old world imitating street lamps of downtown provided. He waited silently in each abysmally hued pocket as his quarry slowly shuffled block by block towards the gates of hell. There were only 2 more blocks to go, and the anxiety within the shadow dweller grew equivalently greater. 12 minutes later, Philip's heavy footfall rattled through the open-air hallway leading to his apartment as he clumsily climbed the concrete flight of stairs leading to the 2nd floor of a large 3-story apartment building lit in excruciating yellow by hundreds of fluorescent lights humming as loudly as the flies within Philip's apartment would in 3 days. The apartment building was one of 3 arranged in an open box formation around a neatly kept kidney-shaped swimming pool. Philip entered through the back of the center building. His human shadow had no choice but to wait behind in the parking lot, no matter how drunk. Philip would have had no trouble making out such a dark and menacing figure bathed in bright yellow light. He knew which apartment belonged to his prey. Before sunrise it would become his tomb. Philip had the deadliest vice a marked man could possibly have: repetition. He would drink every night he could at the same bar and stumble home around the 11:30 mark to pass out for roughly 5 hours before waking to wash off the previous night's excesses and stumble hungover to work. The hangovers were described to his office mates and employers as frequent migraines, and with a little acting he was able to pull off the illusion. It was his life before business college that had marked him. It was his animal torture and constant alcoholism that had sealed his fate. An hour of silence slowly passed by, and the unnatural sentient shadow entered the electric yellow glow and ascended the stairs without making a sound. A small pressurized snapping sound and a muffled cry awoke Philip from his dreamless sleep. Instinctively trying to sit up, upon the realization that the muffled cry was his own, he nearly pulled his shoulder out of socket and fell back to his bed with a grunt. He was tied down. Bed sheets wound around his wrists, waist, ankles, headboard and footboard. He tried to scream despite the realization that he was gagged. The room was completely dark, and a small piece of flesh on the right side of his stomach stung. He screamed and struggled himself breathless. In less than 3 minutes, he felt 2 objects slide firmly into his nostrils. A strip of duct tape soon sealed them in place. "You have asthma, Phil," a slightly gravely voice casually informed him in a low, emotionless tone. "You might just want to concentrate on drawing as much air as you can through that towel in your mouth." Phil kept total darkness and silence during sleep. Heavy curtains blocked out completely the yellow aura outside his bedroom window. He could hear the voice clearly. The objects in his nose must be his earplugs. His heartbeat raced and he whimpered as he panicked to draw breath. "Red Ryder BB gun. I used to have one of these. I never shot cats with them. I would never even pump them more than once if there was even a remote chance an animal was near. You pumped it 10 times and aimed at cats." Next her eyes, Phil stared into the darkness and struggled to breath. The sharp mechanical intake of air and click of metal onward caused a new wave of struggling jerks. 1. Phil screamed as loud as he could and gagged when the vibrations forced a ridge of cloth to scratch against the back of his throat. Phil, you have night terrors, thick walls, and neighbors who no longer check on you. I could ungag you if you like. Would hearing yourself scream make you feel better? Ignoring the muffled, frantic attempts at responding, he pumped the air gun once more. 2. This is as far as I've ever gone when I was planning on shooting at one of my friends when I was younger. To pumps is what I hit you with a couple minutes ago. I always wondered about 3. 2 is just kinda funny from 10 feet away, but I hit you from about 3 feet away. I kinda felt bad. I should have backed up a little more. Huh. Phil no longer responded, his breathing growing weaker as his saliva wetted the towel too much to breathe properly. His entire focus was on staying his panic enough to focus on filling his lungs. But each new casual statement and inquisition from his tormentor, delivered in an increasingly bright and friendly manner, brought with its casual hospitality new waves of terror. Are you bleeding, Phil? Phil's only reply was a low whimper. I want to know if you're bleeding, he stated as the bedside lamp to Phil's left flicked on. He noticed Phil's nude, semi-muscular body glistening with sweat as his scared brown eyes quivered and his intoxicated pupils slowly shrank. His curly brown hair dripped even more sweat across his already soaked forehead. You shouldn't sleep naked, Phil. You never know when you might get robbed or attacked in the middle of the night. Phil strained to make out his captor, but could only make out a dark trench coat and long dark hair in the low light of the 40-watt bulb barely penetrating beyond the lampshade. The menacing figure moved back to the foot of the bed where he nearly blended into the darkness. Nah, you're not bleeding, he began again as he slowly pumped the air rifle a third time and stated 3. He backed up into nearly complete darkness and raised the rifle's sight to his eye. I'm about 6 feet away, and I'm up against the wall, he stated slowly as he focused on his aim. Aim is really important, you know, especially right now. It's dark. You're naked. It'd be real easy to hit something you're not aiming for if you don't pay attention. Phil's intent gaze into the darkness cringed away as he turned his head to the right. Those tears, Phil, tell me, would you be shooting those poor little kitties if they knew it was coming? If you saw the understanding of what was coming in their eyes, I think you would. These things get kinda loud once you reach 10 pumps. The 10th one, especially, is pretty loud. Feels like the lever is gonna snap, too. I bet they understood plenty of times. I bet they didn't cringe like you are. They didn't cry like you are, and that was with 10 pumps. Without warning, he fired into Phil's right inner thigh less than a second before finishing his sentence. A muffled, sustained wailing and thrashing erupted, shaking the bed as thick blood began to pool underneath Phil's leg. Damn, Phil, I never would have thought just one extra pump would do so much. I probably should have aimed somewhere a little less tender though, huh? Phil winced and stiffened his body against the pain. Settle down, Phil. It was only 3 pumps, the torturer said through a sneer as he rapidly popped the BB gun multiple times. This next one will be 6, he added as he slowly aimed at Phil's torso and fired into his right breast. Phil's body convulsed as he tightened every muscle in his body and bit deep into the towel. The small puncture slowly began to trail blood towards his sternum. There you go. That's how a man should face pain. Press against it with everything you have. Screaming just shows lack of emotional control, he explains over the loud clicking of 8 more pumps. I realize I haven't made my intentions clear here, Phil, he added as he slowly stepped forward and pressed the muzzle to the skin an inch below Phil's navel. I'm not necessarily here to rob you, though I will take any cash you have. Phil's rapid breathing became thin and wheezy as he squirmed against the muzzle press forcefully against his flesh and stared up into the now visible blue eyes, calmly looking into his, and waited for the words, already mentally delivered, to be spoken. His eyes followed the slightly upturned nose down to the clean-shaven, slightly tanned face and slack, yet menacing expression. Phil, you're 32. You went to college to better yourself when you were 24. You had the world ahead of you. You only had to overcome one small thing. The stranger leaned in closer, focusing his weight on the gun and beginning to speak with a gradually growing seriousness to his tone and an increasingly stabbing glare in his eye. All you had to do was stay off the alcohol. You even made it through yet you went back into the same ditch you crawled out of. All you had to do was focus. You just had to focus as intently as you are now. You made everybody so proud. How proud would your mother be now, Phil? How proud would she be to know the separate hit and runs weigh on your conscience? Yet you still drink. You think selling your car so it doesn't happen again made you a better person. Phil, crying and wheezing, stared deep into his blue eyes without a single attempt to lie or plead. I'm not going to turn you in, Phil. I'm going to kill you. Phil closed his eyes as tears pooled over his cheeks and his throat clutched under the weight of his now uncontrollable sobbing. The stranger slowly stood straight and fired the gun where it rested. Below the navel, a small pool of blood instantly rose to kiss the barrel. Again, Phil fought against the tears and stinging pain, to reply only with tense muscles and gritting teeth shredding his cloth gag. Phil, you knew somewhere in the back of your mind that somebody like me would come along someday and make you pay for everything you were ever ashamed of, the executioner slowly stated, as he pumped the gun 10 times and leisurely walked back to the bedside lamp. Phil's eyes shot open and stared at the gun aimed for his skull and quietly muttered the only word that had yet to make sense through his wet, shredded gag. 10. The gun unerringly slammed into Phil's left eye socket, cracking bone and forcing runny, pink liquid and chunks of white and red tissue to ooze from between the socket and gun barrel as he convulsed and moaned. 11, he corrected as he pumped one final time, snapping the lever off, and fired. October 10th, 2006. Didn't sleep last night. Usually don't after a murder, no matter how tired I may be. Watch the sun rise through the thick clouds. It's still morning and it's starting to sprinkle. Last night's victim was kind enough to buy Emmy breakfast, daylight donuts, and milk, sitting on a bench in Woodward Park and eating, writing, or whatever the hell I can make interesting. After I'm done, I think I'll take a walk around Swan Lake. Swan Lake is a large, beautiful pond filled with different species of waterfowl. It has a couple islands and a fountain in the center. I don't really know who may end up reading this in the future, but it may surprise you to know that the most tranquil and beautiful places are often the places you are most likely to meet somebody with a guilty conscience, the last time you were at a place like Swan Lake, you probably saw somebody standing at the edge of the water, fixated solely on the ripples. No matter how noisy or crowded the area surrounding him gets, he remains completely lost in his own reflection. This person is likely a murderer or rapist. He is there to wash away his sins. He is there because the chaotic and ceasing memories of his dark actions hammer away at his conscience, and he is looking for anything to dull the pain. It's places like these that I find one of the most common type of prey, repentant offenders. Not all of them deserve the type of punishment I specialize in. Sometimes they just need to be scared. Sometimes they need reality to manifest the fears they try and pretend are simply paranoia. Philip Harnath, last night's victim, was one of these repentant offenders, but it was clear that no consequence, save death, was high enough to sober him up before another died at his hands. It was true that he sold his car, but he sold it out of fear of it becoming all the evidence needed to tie him to deaths. He would have bought another. He would have drank more. He would have swerved uncontrollably into a child, a young couple, or maybe even into a whole family. Donuts are gone. Rain is lightening up. I think I'll go gaze into Swan Lake, October 10th, 2006. People pass by and I wonder why they don't cut a wide circle around me as they go. Can't they see the same thing in my eyes that I see in my reflection? Swan Lake is clean today. I saw only one murder there. He was drowning in the sins he had witnessed. He was staring up at me from the dark, overcast sky beneath the ripples. We locked eyes and judged each other. Neither of us appeared to have the strength to carry on. It gets like this. Sometimes the depression sets in. The obscurity of my existence blankets me like a heavy fog. It gets like this whenever I find myself to be the most guilty person within sight. There is only one cure for it: punishment. I know how it feels to be a vampire. I know the depressing loneliness that comes after a meal, and their thoughts are no longer on blood, but companionship. Once the blood within their prey stops calling to the vampire's instincts, and they can see for a small amount of time beyond the bloodlust that drives them. For that portion of time they are at their most human, and are most likely to feel the remorse and longing that can only be felt by those who have crossed a boundary that can never be returned from. Their struggle to live can only be fueled by denying that right to another. They are forced after every meal to watch as those they long to be go about their lives. They are forced to wish they could be the things that hours later they must kill. However tragic a vampire's story may be, mine is much crueler. I am a vampire that can only sustain my life by extinguishing that of another vampire. I am forced daily to witness the vampire long for his former life. It is during this touching scene of remembrance, longing, and heartbreak that I slowly set upon and violently disable my prey. The vampire is a great and terrible predator, and its death is not often mourned. But when caught in reflection upon its transgressions, the sorrow and repentance is very real. When death is certain, all but the cruelest and vilest show promise of change. However, promise is not a guarantee of change, and it is my heartrending duty to deny that chance and see not the face of a killer upon death, but that of an innocent. Regretfully, I have become as reflective as Swan Lake's surface. It would take the discovery of a true monster to restore my determination and focus. I know just the place to find one. October 10th, 2006, Veterans Park. Not the type of place you would have expected me to look for a true monster, right? Wide open space, near business buildings and an often used road. That's what you see. I see a park near a school with a parking lot, a concrete shelter, shady trees, and an easy-to-find location. I see a perfect place to meet your drug dealer after dropping your kids off at school. I see a true monster sitting at a picnic table in the shelter reading a magazine, checking his watch, and occasionally glancing around. He's waiting for someone, maybe more than just one. However many his is waiting for, I will find out. He is just another guy enjoying a cloudy day at the park. So am I. As he sits and innocently reads his magazine, I will find a tree a couple 100 feet from him and coincidentally within perfect view of him, and read Fahrenheit for 151. I always wanted to read it. I wonder if Phil ever did. If so, his copy shows no signs of it. Story 3. Swing away. Teeter walked in large circles through the grass with his brothers, Kyle and Levi. It was a beautiful day. The sky was free of any clouds, and the sun shined brightly upon their side of the world. Peter looked down at the grass as he walked, thinking about what he and his brothers could play outside to fill their void of boredom. Teeter was the youngest of the three. Then there was Levi, and finally Kyle. They lived in a secluded area around the woods far from any other houses, meaning they had a big area to play in, although they couldn't do very much with only 3 people. You got any ideas? Levi, Kyle asked in a monotonous tone. Nope. The only thing I can think of is what Mom told us not to do, Levi replied, which is practically damn near everything. Their mother was overprotective, placing restrictions on the many things they love to do outside. Ever since Peter broke his finger during a game of wrestling, they were only allowed to play games like tag and hide and seek. After a while, though, the 2 games got painfully dull with such few players. Their dad would play with them occasionally, though that tended not to end very well. Their father had a hot temper and would often take his anger out on one of the boys when he grew angry. If it got really bad, he would even go to the shed and grab one of the tools. Teeter looked at his upper arm, examining the lone white scar that went horizontally across it. Teeter was sure that all 3 of them had scars on one place or another. Kyle was nearly strangled, too. Death once by their father when he came home drunk, and Peter was forced to watch, unable to do anything. Daddy, please stop. Daddy, please. He didn't want to think about that anymore. Teeter was always the quiet child, one of few words, as his mother described him once. He always tried to be polite and was a kind person, or at least he liked to think he was. Levi was more of the laid-back type and enjoyed playing sports, such as football, and also swore a lot more than Kyle or Peter did. Kyle was a calm and collected kid, and always protected Peter from getting into harm's way. Peter snapped back to reality, realizing that he was spacing out again. He tended to lose himself in his thoughts. Not aware of the things that went on around him, he inspected his surroundings. The silence from his brothers and even the wildlife around him was very uncomfortable, giving him a strange feeling. The only noise was the eerie sound of the wind. Ooh, you know what? Let's just play tag. I mean, it's probably the best thing we could do right now, Levi said, breaking the silence. But tag is so damn boring with just the 3 of us. We can't do anything out here, Kyle said. He looked at their house. We should just give it up and go back inside. Levi thought for a moment. Well, Mom and Dad are at work, right? Why don't we just climb the trees for a while until they come back? Levi proposed. Teeter and Kyle stopped and considered the proposition. Climbing the trees wasn't allowed, and they would be punished harshly by their father if they were caught doing so. Thoughts ran through Peter's mind again and again, going in a circle like the one they walked in. What if their parents catch them? What will Dad do? But at that moment, Teeter decided to do something that he hadn't done in years. He chose to forget about their parents for a little while. Why don't they just climb a few trees for a bit and then stop before Mom or Dad gets home? They had a few hours. Anyway, you know what, we should do that. I mean, it's better than just walking around not doing jack shit. Kyle agreed. He looked at Teeter, awaiting his say on the idea. Sure, let's do that for a while, but not for too long. We don't want Dad to get angry, he said, even though he had decided to forget about his parents and just try to enjoy himself. For a bit, the idea of their parents catching them was still stuck in his mind like an immovable boulder. He continued to tell himself they wouldn't be caught, but by now it felt like he was lying to himself. He continued to go with the plan anyway, not wanting to ruin the opportunity they had. Yeah, definitely, Kyle replied, glancing at Peter's scarred arm. The three of them looked around the area, searching for a tree that was good enough to climb. Teeter looked around and stopped, finding the ideal tree almost instantly. Kyle and Levi seemed to stop on the tree as well. The tree stood at least 20 feet away from their home at a daunting height, its top half swaying lightly in the wind. Teeter raised his arm, curling his fingers to point at the green and brown giant. Let's go to that one. It's huge, Teeter said in a small voice. Damn, I've been wanting to climb that for ages, Levi said. Come on, guys, let's go. All right, let's go, Peter, Kyle said, running to catch up with Levi. Teeter brought himself forward, initiating his run towards the tree, though not nearly as fast as either of his brothers. Teeter watched Levi and Kyle arrive at the base of the tree, looking up at the clutter of branches and leaves. He came shortly after. Holy hell, Levi said, still staring at what was above him. We should stop at about 3 o'clock. Okay, said Kyle. He looked at Peter and Levi. Peter nodded and checked his watch to look at the time, 12:28 p.m. Their parents got home at 3:30. So they had a total of 2.5 hours to just climb the trees. Nothing to worry about. Levi didn't care to answer Kyle, jumping up and grabbing on to a big, wide branch about 7 feet off the ground. He pulled himself up, continuing to climb the tree with impressive speed. Teeter looked at Kyle, searching for some sort of approval. Kyle looked back at Peter and nodded, a smile on his lips. Let's have some fun, Pete, he said calmly. Maybe it isn't going to be so bad, thought Peter. Hey, guys, Levi yelled down at them from about a fourth up the tree. What if we played tag in here? Peter's face lit up. The idea sounded perfect. He again looked at Kyle, who began to smirk. All right, I'm it, he said, looking directly at Peter. Peter's expression instantly changed from happy to panicked. He quickly ran around the trunk of the tree, searching for a branch that he could jump and reach to. On the other side from Kyle, he managed to find a branch up to par with his height. He leapt for the branch, his hand clasping around the rough bark of the tree. He then noticed that his brother was not running, but slowly moving in a tiptoe. "Teeter, I'm coming," Kyle said in a menacing whisper. Adrenaline surged through Peter's veins as he pulled himself up the branch and held onto the trunk of the tree to stabilize himself and stand upon it. He grabbed onto the next branch while looking down to see where Kyle was, but he wasn't anywhere to be seen. Teeter continued to hold onto the branch, using it to keep balance while he looked to the other side of the tree. Kyle wasn't on the ground anymore, instead climbing up the tree for Peter. Kyle was several feet below him, but continued to make his way up the tree with frightening speed. Peter pulled himself up one more branch and looked back to where he was, realizing that Kyle was not actually going after him anymore, but instead moving on to Levi. "Better start moving, Levi," said Kyle, a big grin plastered to his face. Teeter craned his neck to look up to where Levi was, seeing him perch on a branch halfway up the tree. Teeter grabbed the tree trunk again to stabilize while he sat on the branch, watching the showdown between his two brothers unfold. "Hey, why aren't you going after Peter? He's right there," Levi yelled down the tree. "Nah, I ain't gonna let you sit up there all day," Kyle answered, showing no sign of stopping his ascent. Levi looked up to see that nearly all the branches above him were too thin to support him, so he decided to move down the tree in an attempt to gain more leverage. He climbed down and around the tree, most likely trying to get to Peter and avoid Kyle at the same time. Kyle clearly noticed his plan and quickly advanced to the other side of the tree, while Peter simply sat, watching the battle unfold. Levi was blocked on his way down. Trapped by Kyle, he sat on the only branch near him. It was a thinner branch, dipping down from his weight. "What a load of bullshit," Levi said, irritated. He gave up, dropping from the safety of sitting on the branch and holding on with his hands, letting his legs dangle down for Kyle to tag. "All right, go ahead, NJ." Levi's words were cut off by a large snap from the branch he held, breaking away from the tree and sending Levi plummeting down to the ground. Peter froze in shock as he watched Levi scream in terror and reach out for a branch in a desperate panic, only to have his hand smack into bark. His arms and legs continued to collide with several other branches before his feet made contact with the dirt. His right leg landed first at an unnatural angle, along with a horrendous snap. Levi let out a horrific sound that Peter had never in his life heard before, nor ever wanted to hear again. He continued to scream in pain for what felt like forever, and then he fell silent. Peter stared down at his brother, whose body had almost entirely ceased movement. His right leg was bent in a horribly unnatural position. He looked to Kyle, who was also staring down at Levi and wearing an expression of absolute shock. Everything was dead silent. Even the wind seemed like it stopped blowing. "Levi," Kyle said shakily. Teeter had never heard so much fear in Kyle's voice. Levi produced a sound similar to a dying animal. Kyle quickly climbed down the tree, and Peter followed, feeling very conscious about where he placed his foot now. Teeter and Kyle dropped down from the tree and moved slowly towards Levi. Kyle sped up his pace, getting on his hands and knees about a foot from Levi. He looked at his right leg. Peter stood by Kyle, staring wide-eyed at the mess. A bone stuck out of his leg, caked in splotches of red. He bled constantly from the spot where it jutted out, and the only thing connecting his leg with the rest of his body was his flesh. Peter gagged and looked away. He proceeded to gag once more before vomit poured out of his mouth. He had never seen anything like this in his entire life. Levi began to sob and yell. "Oh my God," Kyle whispered under his breath. "Fuck." Levi yelled abruptly, making Peter and Kyle jump. Peter started to cry and fell to his knees, looking away from the carnage. "A bit worse of a problem than your parents, huh?" whispered a voice in the back of Peter's mind. Peter gasped, freezing in place. Parents. His mind exploded with terror and fear. The concept of their parents seeing that Levi had a broken leg and that they had broken the rules nearly caused him to faint. Dad might kill them, and Peter wasn't exaggerating. "Kyle?" Peter turned and stared into Kyle's eyes, his voice filled with dread. "Dad is going to kill us." It sounded like any other exaggeration about a child's father, but he knew it was true. Kyle stared back at him, and another moment of silence took place for what felt like hours. Kyle went back to Levi and told him everything was going to be all right, and gave him a hug. He walked to Peter and grabbed him by the arms. His face was dark under the shade of the tree, speckled with little splotches of light. His pupils were abnormally large, even in the shade. "Peter, look at me. If Dad sees this and finds out that we broke the rules, well, I know you know what will happen," Kyle whispered, glancing back to Levi. He was turned away from them, sobbing. "Nah, I don't think Dad is going to help Levi. I think he'll hurt him instead, along with you and me." "He'll hurt us bad," Kyle gulped. You know the shed." Peter nodded, not sure of where Kyle was going with this. "There's an axe in there." Peter gasped in horror as he realized what his brother was saying. "Doubly what?" Peter muttered and shook his head. "Peter, how do I say this? You're probably not gonna be seeing Levi much longer. I think we're gonna need a shovel too," Kyle said grimly. Peter was astounded. Was his brother really so demented to resort to something as vile as this? How? Why? What? Peter was speechless. It couldn't be real. "Peter," he again looked back to Levi, who was crying. "We'll tell Dad he ran away. Then maybe it won't be as bad for us. I know how this sounds, but, God, I don't want to say. I'm gonna go to the shed, so you stay here and stick with Levi, all right?" Peter gave a slow nod, still unsure if what was going on was even real. Kyle nodded back and turned away, beginning his walk towards the small shed behind the house. Peter turned to look at Levi, who was still crying. He walked to Levi, his entire body shaking. "Levi, are you okay?" He just wanted to close his eyes and wake up in his ragged old bed. But no matter how much he tried to make it all go away, it didn't work. Levi sniffled, then spoke, his back turned to him. "Peter, where's Kyle going?" Peter had no idea what to tell him. He's getting a first aid kit." It was the only other thing he could think of. "Oh, I don't think that's gonna help very much. We're home alone for another 2 hours or so, and..." He took a shaky breath. "We need to find something fast. We could call somebody, all right." "No, Dad BB broke the home phone because he doesn't trust us. Only Mom and Dad have phones. Remember what happened last year?" Peter said sadly. He remembered when Kyle tried to use a home phone to call the police after their father had hit Peter with the sharp thing from the shed. He didn't know the name of the tool, but it hurt. It hurt a lot when Kyle tried to call the cops. Dad took the phone from him and pushed him, then threw the phone to the ground. He then proceeded to stop and stop and stop. Teeter concluded that Levi must have blocked that out. Oh yeah. The disappointment in Levi's voice was harrowing. Teeter checked over his shoulder to see where Kyle was. He was close to the shed, walking with an unsettling lack of hesitation. Peter, this is so fucking painful. He turned his head to look at Peter. His eyes were puffy from tears and mucus ran from his nose. Peter crouched down and wrapped his arms around his brother, giving him the most genuine and loving hug possible. Levi hugged back, his entire body trembling. He couldn't help but start to cry. It's going to be okay, Levi whispered. If only Levi knew what Kyle was really doing. Teeter didn't respond, staying nestled in his warm embrace. They held the hug for as long as they could, not saying a word. At that moment, Peter thought he would wake up to find out it was all just a bad dream. He then heard the loathsome voice of Kyle. Peter, you gotta get up now. His voice was a mix of sorrowful and demanding. Peter hesitantly stood up, looking down at Levi. Levi gave him a warm smile. Teeter turned his head to look at Kyle. He stood holding the long wooden handle of the axe at his side. First aid kit, Levi said, beginning to panic. Are you guys out of your fucking minds? Teeter looked down at the ground with dismay, closing his eyes. He couldn't handle it. Dad's just going to hurt you. Levi, he'll hurt you. Along with Peter and I, he might even possibly kill one of us. So killing me is gonna help? Fuck you. He spat at him. Kyle didn't respond. He dropped the shovel and handed the axe to Peter. What what are you doing? Teeter questioned. Kyle didn't respond. Kyle, I may have the broken leg, but I think you're the one who needs to be axed. What's wrong with you? Levi said angrily. Kyle's expression quickly turned from concerned to angry, and he responded with something that shook Peter to his very core. Swing away, Pete. Teeter was bewildered. Why did he give it to you? Is it a test? A test to see how loyal you are. Kyle looked at him. You can do this for me, right, Peter? He heard the wickedness in his voice. Teeter was scared, but knew what had to be done. If he didn't bring the axe down on Levi, then Kyle would. There was almost no way out. The weight of the axe pulled him down. He adjusted his grip, holding it with both hands. Levi yelled at him, telling him not to do it. He made a pathetic attempt to crawl away, only to damage his leg more. He let out a yelp of pain. Swing away. Peter closed his eyes, feeling the smooth handle of the axe. Swing away. He held the axe high, and he heard Levi scream. Swing with a terrible shriek. Peter swung the axe, not down, but to his right. Before Kyle could even react properly, the blade sliced into his belly. He looked down to the axe, and then at Peter, horrified. Peter, why, you idiot. He fell back, the axe pulling away from him as he did. His body met the ground with a hard thump, and blood seeped through his shirt, pooling on his stomach. Teeter dropped the axe and ran to Levi. Are you okay, Levi? Peter said anxiously. Levi breathed heavily, his face frozen into an expression of sheer confoundment. Holy shit. He looked at Peter with wide eyes. You basically just killed him. His voice was beginning to slur. It was a saint stupid idea. Tears rolled down his cheeks, and he was barely able to speak. Why would he try to kill you? He hugged him with all of his might, though Levi didn't hug back, confusing Peter. He pulled back and looked at Levi. His eyes were slowly beginning to shut. Peter looked at his leg, realizing the amount of blood that he was losing. Levi? Come on, please, don't die. No, Levi. As Levi's eyes fully shut, Peter's world began to fragment, his mind unable to cope with the situation anymore. Levi continued to bleed from his leg profusely, creating a small puddle of red where his leg lied. Peter's two brothers lied on the ground, bleeding to death, and Peter wasn't able to do anything about it. He couldn't think straight. His thoughts went at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Kyle's last words before he fell rang through his mind as he cried uncontrollably where he sat. Peter, you idiot. Peter soon calmed down, sniffling and hiccuping as he sat up. He looked back at Kyle. He had clearly tried to reach out for the axe, but failed to grasp it. His eyes gazed up at the sky, and his entire body quivered as he breathed. Eventually his breathing stopped, and his body lied still. "'Kay, Kyle." "Hello." Kyle didn't respond. He gave a hopeless giggle as one last tear was shed. Peter's eyes shifted to the shovel that laid on the ground nearby. He had just wanted to save Levi's life and keep his demented brother from doing anything to him. But all he had done was kill Kyle in an emotional rage and leave Levi to die. He couldn't do anything to help them. Instead of crying again, he chuckled lightly, not sure of how to react to anything anymore. He stood up and walked towards the shovel, bending down and picking it up from the ground. His body shook from laughter as the world fell apart all around him. His brothers laughed with him too, and Peter felt at ease in their company. He held the shovel with both hands, looking at Kyle, then Levi. Their bodies may have lied still, but in Peter's world they were right there with him, laughing hysterically along with him. Peter soon calmed down and looked at the shovel, its head rusty and old. He had to bury them in the ground. It took a lot of work, but he had the company of his brothers to help him get through. Eventually he had dug 2 shallow graves just for his brothers. He managed to drag them into the holes, finishing the process by shoveling in the dirt and patting it down to make it look nice. He and his brothers thought that this was hilarious, and they laughed loudly in their graves. Peter asked if they were comfortable. They simply laughed. He assumed that meant yes. He used grass and leaves to hide them, and then ran home to find a place to hide. As he dug, he realized how angry he felt towards his mom and dad, how they had hurt him and his brothers constantly through physical and verbal abuse, and this time they had killed the only friends he had ever had. Kyle and Levi, they made it so that Branch would snap if they broke the rules. His parents, of course, knew they would eventually climb the trees and that one of them would fall. It was all part of their sick little plan to get rid of him and his brothers, but they didn't get Peter. He giggled with glee. His mother and father would eventually arrive, but he wasn't scared. That was all okay, because the bloody head of that axe would bring them down anyway.